Hello, I am your teacher, Mr. Pacitti, and this is my classroom here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. So put away your mobile phones, put away your morals. It's time to concentrate, it's time to study. This is Super ShowDown, and this is Graded. Before we get down to business, I am assigning these grades on the basis of the quality of the matches and the booking implications of the results that we've seen tonight. I know this is a very, very controversial event, obviously, but this is my classroom, this is a wrestling lesson, so let's crack on. We're kicking things off with the one and only pre-show match. Two of the best tag teams in the world here, the Usos taking on the Revival. So this match started with just 12 minutes left on the pre-show itself, so you know that it's going to be a slobber knocker. Fast-paced stuff as things quickly spill to the outside, and then the Revival beat down on Jimmy Uso. Hey, it's classic heel versus babyface tag team action, you know the score. Jimmy finally manages to hit a kick, tags in Jay, there's a visible 3 count at one point, but Dash has the ref distracted, and then another tag from the Usos, dual super kicks, 1, 2, 3, and that's your lot. The Usos picking up the win. Just an average tag match, really. It was a little bit better than we may see on Raw, but not by much. Have a C+, let's get on to the main card. So the main card starts with the Universal title match. The champion Seth Rollins taking on Baron Corbin, and poor old Baron is still having to wear his Weatherspoons outfit. He must be sweltering. The bell rings and the two go at it, with Baron Corbin working the injured ribs of Seth Rollins following Brock Lesnar's attack on Raw. I don't really want to talk too much about this match though, because it's more about what happened after the match, so I'll just breeze through this. Corbin hits some moves, Rollins hits some moves, Corbin hits deep 6, Seth Rollins does some of those lovely dives, and then Corbin goes for the end of days, doesn't quite nail it, and then gets all pissy and grabs himself a chair. And this is where it all gets interesting. Corbin has the chair, he's about to use it, despite the fact that it's not a no DQ match. He's going to get disqualified if he uses that chair, and then the referee's all like, no, don't do it, Corbin. And Corbin just bullies John Cone, the referee, and then John Cone finally snaps and he gets all pissy with Baron Corbin, which allows Seth Rollins to roll up Corbin, get the 3 count, and that's the finish of the match. Seth wins with a roll up. And this is where it gets very interesting. Baron Corbin is all upset because of the referee, and he takes it out on Seth Rollins, hitting him with an end of days. And then he leaves, and whose music plays? I think you know, it's Mr. Money in the Bank himself, Brock Lesnar. Ooh. So Seth is laid out, Brock makes his way to the ring, chair in hand. He gets in the ring, and then as Paul Heyman is getting in the ring, he falls on his bloody arse. Well, it's not really his arse, he falls on his front, but arse was funnier. And then this leads to a distraction, allowing Seth Rollins to attack Brock Lesnar with the chair. Boom, 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 stomp on the briefcase, and that is the end. And that is the last we'll see of Brock Lesnar tonight. I'm going to give this a B-, but that's largely because of the aftermath, because the match itself wasn't especially great, as you would expect from a match involving Baron Corbin. So the match was fine, but I actually really liked the Brock Lesnar coming in. Paul falling over was quite unexpected, and it set up a little bit of intrigue for the rest of the night. Was Brock going to appear again? The answer is no, as I've just said. But also, we didn't get a Brock cash-in Saudi Arabia, and that has to be worth something. Andrade versus Finn is next, with the IC title on the line. Finn Bálor is, of course, all painted up. Oh, look at how spooky he is. And he's also paid someone to make it snow in Saudi Arabia, decreasing his chances of getting heat stroke. It was very, very hot out there, and increasing his chances of winning the match. Clever boy. Nice back and forth to start things off. These two do have tremendous chemistry. This is one of the matches that I was certainly, despite the relative lack of build, I was more excited for this match than almost anything else on the card. Unfortunately, the match itself wasn't all that. Andrade goes for the three amigos, Finn blocks the third amigo, but Andrade hits it anyway, and I always thought that was a bit of a babyface move, sort of paying tribute to the legend that is Eddie Guerrero, despite the fact that you're being a heel. Save that for when you're a babyface. Anyway, Finn goes on to hit some great over-the-top dives. We've seen it all before, but it's still very impressive stuff, and Finn takes control. Andrade blocks the sling blade, but Finn hits it on his second attempt. We see that great back elbow from Andrade, one of my favorite moves in wrestling. Despite the fact that it's super basic, nobody can pull that off quite like Andrade, and then goes and hits the double knees. Later on, Andrade goes for a powerbomb to the outside, doesn't manage. Finn hits him with a double foot stomp, and then a double foot stomp to Andrade's back from the top rope. A few more nice near falls, and then Andrade finally manages to hit the hammerlock DDT, but can't put Finn away. Finn kicks out at 2, and Andrade starts screaming, "My finish! My finish!" And that's just me playing any WWE game on the PlayStation. We all know how this goes from here. Finn hits the top rope DDT and then puts Andrade away with the coup de grace. So I think this was a really good match, but I don't think it was as good as it could have been. I was super hyped for this one, and I think the crowd not being invested at all did hamper the match, because it was just clear that they are there for the legends and Roman Reigns, and that's pretty much it. And Mansoor as well. But this one, it just could have been better. I expected more, which is a horrible thing to say. I'm sure we'll see a great match between Finn and Andrade, but we didn't see it at Super ShowDown. This one gets a B-. I'm not going to blame the crowd at all. The crowd hasn't affected the grade itself, but I do think with a hotter crowd, not temperature-wise, because as we saw with the little temperature gauge in the corner that kept popping up, it was very warm in there tonight. But I do think with a more excitable crowd, this one would have been a lot more fun. Next up is Shane versus Roman, and Sweat-O-Mac has backup in the form of Big Bad Drew McIntyre. Shane immediately takes the fight to Roman after Roman is distracted by Drew, and then later on Shane McMahon distracts the referee, allowing Drew McIntyre to get a few strikes in on the outside. Shane with some of those trademark punches, and I don't know if it's the heat, but they are even more pathetic looking than they usually are. And then Roman starts making a comeback, but Shane takes him out with a chop block and then locks him in a triangle hold, and I'm fed up of talking about Shane McMahon like he's an actual wrestler. This is so frustrating. Like, Drew at this point isn't even really doing anything. Shane is literally just out wrestling Roman Reigns. Roman then takes out Drew on the outside, but as he comes back in, he's hit by a Spear-O-Mac for a 2 count, and then Shane sets up for a coast to coast, but Roman gets back up, hits him with a Superman punch for a 2 count. Roman then goes for a spear of his own, but Shane sort of blocks it. There's an awkward ref bump, and then as Charles Robinson is recovering, Drew McIntyre has come in, hit Roman Reigns with a Claymore, allowing Shane McMahon to clamber over and win. He won the match. He beat Roman Reigns. Wasn't expecting that. I'm giving this a very generous C-, because this match was saved by the finish for me, because it involved Drew McIntyre. Drew was the one to deal the final blow, but everything before it was absolute bollocks. As I've already said, Shane McMahon should not be going blow for blow with Roman Reigns. He shouldn't be countering his stuff. He shouldn't be being presented as a wrestler. If Drew had been involved throughout, and every time Roman started getting a bit of momentum, he interfered in some way, that would be absolutely fine. But that really didn't happen here. Shane McMahon is still being presented as a guy who can go blow for blow with Roman Reigns. And that shouldn't be happening, especially with heel Shane McMahon. Everyone else should be doing the work for him. It was crap. Next up, it's the 3-on-1 handicap match that I know we've all been looking forward to. It's Lars Sullivan taking on all 3 members of the Lucha House Party. I mean, what we all expected was just a squash match, wasn't it? And that's not exactly what we got. In fact, what we got was even worse than that, because it didn't benefit anyone at all. Let me explain. So Lars beats up Kalisto for a bit, he then beats up Lindsay for a bit, and then he beats up Grand Metalik for a bit. And then they all try and take advantage of the numbers game, but that doesn't quite work out. So Lars clears house, he hits Kalisto with one of those one-armed power bombs, and then he just clubs his face in for a bit, and then he goes up top, I assume for the diving headbutt, at which point all of the Lucha House Party gang up on him all at once. That's not allowed. That leads to a DQ. As Lucha House Party are leaving, Lars follows them up the ramp and just completely destroys them. And that's the closing image of this segment of the show. Lars Sullivan, problematic Lars, beating up 3 Mexican lads in Saudi Arabia. There is a sentence for you. This one gets an E. I don't need to explain why this is bad. It didn't help Lars, it didn't help Lucha House Party, it's ended in a DQ, and that probably means that we're going to get more of it. The story's not over yet. It's now time to hop in your DeLorean. We are going all the way back to 2004 for Triple H versus Randall Keith. Randall Keith. Randall Keith. Na. Randy Orton comes out first and has like £500,000 worth of fireworks, as most people did last night. And then Triple H comes out on his big daddy badass bicycle, looking really super cool. Are you ready? I said, are you ready for rest holds? So we see headlocks, we see wrist locks. Bloody hell. Triple H starts working the hand of Randy Orton, I assume, to try to avoid that signature handshake of Randy's. And this was a slog. They brawl on the outside for a bit. There's a headlock which literally lasts 2.5 minutes. And I think you get the idea here. It's a Triple H Randy Orton match in 2019. Let's just skip all the bollocks, because this match literally lasted like 25 minutes and we're going to get to the finish sooner rather than later. DDT through the ropes, spinebuster, RKO, kick out, edge of my seat. Orton goes for the punt, Triple H catches him, pedigree, kicks out, edge of my ruddy seat. Trips drops Orton on the announce table something like 4 times, but then when they get back in the ring, Orton finally catches him with an RKO out of nowhere for the 3 count. Your winner, Randy Orton. 25 minutes. C-. This is exactly what we were expecting, only it lasted even longer than we thought it would. And to make things worse, there wasn't really any narrative. The story here is that these 2 men wanted lots of money, so they did a wrestle in Saudi Arabia. Vintage storytelling. Up next is Bobby Lashley versus Braun Strowman in a match that I legitimately forgot was happening. Big test of strength to kick things off. That's right, we've gone even further back in time to 1990. Lashley grabs him, hits a power slam for a 2 count. What else happened here? It doesn't even matter. This was every bit the lumbering power fest that we all thought it would be, except unlike the last match, it didn't really have the star power to get the audience invested, so they didn't care either, so it just made the match even more boring, even more tedious than it already was. We know Lashley can be great, we've seen it in TNA, we know Strowman can be great as well, but it's just so difficult to care. Braun ends up putting away Bobby Lashley with the running power slam and gets himself a D+, because it just wasn't very entertaining. It should have been me! Dolph Ziggler versus Kofi Kingston for the WWE title is up next. Don't worry, after this one, there's only 2 more matches. Match of the night was always going to be either this one or Finn versus Andrade. Unfortunately, neither of them stood out enough to take that title because both of them were just a little bit underwhelming. What I will say here is that these 2 have great chemistry. We already knew that from their countless IC title matches back in the day, but it's still very much apparent. There were some nice sequences, sure, both guys getting in all of their signature offense. At one point, Dolph Ziggler is on the outside with Kofi Kingston and then just nails Xavier with a super kick for practically no reason. And then later, when the finish happens, Xavier gets up on the apron, hits Dolph with a high kick, which leads to Kofi Kingston hitting Trouble in Paradise to pick up the win. I feel like I've been a bit unfair because this wasn't a bad match by any means. As I say, it was one of the better matches on the card. And at least we got a bit of storyline progression with Xavier getting involved in some way, which has led to a steel cage match being announced, Dolph Ziggler versus Kofi Kingston at Stomping Grounds. But it's just so difficult to care at this point about Dolph Ziggler. I don't want to see those 2 wrestle again, even if it is in a steel cage, and even if that steel cage stipulation for once actually makes sense to keep Xavier out. Maybe Kofi and Xavier are going to have a bit of a falling out about Xavier's interference in the match. I'm just not that bothered. Seen it all before, and I feel really unfair here. I'm going to give this one a C+, and I know, in the words of Jack the Jobber, that's a little bit harsh, but I just don't care. It's time for the greatest battle royal. 50 men, 0 women. And this one was every bit the mess that we assumed it would be. Battle royals are always pretty bad because it's just a bunch of like, and then people getting thrown out. But because there were 50 men in this one, it took forever to get rid of enough people to allow actual bits of wrestling to happen. It's not to say that there weren't some fun moments, because there were. Titus's entrance, for example, got a chuckle from me, and at this point in the night, before the result of this match, it might have actually been the biggest pop of the night. I also enjoyed Ricochet and Ali eliminating Samoa Joe with the sort of a combined Chris Benoit Big Show Rumble spot where they both get over and hoist him over. That was nice too, and I enjoyed the result of the match itself, Mansoor picking up the win. Sure, it was a cheap home country pop and maybe a little bit predictable, but I genuinely enjoy watching Mansoor, and this felt like a really big thing for him, and I like seeing people who work really hard, like Mansoor does, have nice things. And yeah, sure, it was a bit pandering. His promo after was really nice as well, but yeah, for what it was, I enjoyed it. I think it was the right booking decision. Still, I can't give this any more than a C. Like so many other matches on the card, it just dragged on and on and on, and that was made worse by the sheer number of bodies in the ring. It took so long to get to the finish, and yeah, it was just tedious once again. Also, before I continue and before we get to the main event, Shinsuke Nakamura being eliminated by Sin Cara. And finally, the main event, Goldberg versus The Undertaker, and this was utterly awful for many reasons, not least the wrestling itself. Things start off super hot with an almost immediate spear, followed by a chokeslam attempt, and it looks like we're just going to get the greatest hits, and that's fine. Things slow down with a knee bar, followed by another spear attempt, but Taker dodges. Goldberg goes flying into the corner post, which allows him a chance to open himself up, and it's at this point that things really start going downhill. We get an alright chokeslam, and then a tombstone which just goes horribly wrong, with Goldberg being dropped right on the top of his head. A 2 count. Was just happy to see Goldberg able to kick out of that. We then get another spear and then a jackhammer, which again goes horribly, horribly wrong, with Undertaker just being dropped on the back of his neck. It was nasty to watch. Really scary stuff. Really scary stuff. Anyway, let's just get right to the end. We get a bad chokeslam, and then finally that is the end of the match. The Undertaker is the winner. But at what cost? Taker's music starts playing, and Undertaker is visibly pissed off at this point. And understandably so. It was a mess. It shouldn't have happened in the first place. I'm going to leave this match without a grade. It was uncomfortable viewing at best and heartbreaking at worst. These are two guys who are very, very clearly past their prime, especially in Undertaker's case. It's just more apparent than ever that it's time to hang up the boots. These two men are legitimately childhood heroes of mine, and I don't want to see them jeopardize the enjoyment of the rest of their lives just for a quick payday or some cheap nostalgia. It stopped being fun a long time ago, and I don't want to see them messed up. It was a really, really scary match to watch. Sorry to leave things on this rather somber note, but with a show already plagued by controversy and nastiness, this is not how I wanted to see the show itself end, and I just hope both guys are okay. Final grade now, almost forgot about this. Super ShowDown gets a D. There were no standout matches, no especially memorable moments, at least for a good reason, and most importantly, R-Truth didn't even come out. What the hell? Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.